Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 4 of an example and configuration of a QSO. This is Bill Sepulveda, K5LN, and in this part of our Morse code journey we'll discuss what's involved in a QSO, from how to start one, the initial contact information, the body of the QSO, and how to end one by showing a few simple examples. To start a QSO, there are two basic methods to do it: where you call CQ and look for someone to answer you, and second, answering a CQ where you call the station that just called CQ. I know, pretty basic. So we'll start with calling a CQ with some examples of how to do it. The first method is what I call the long version, which is the one I recommend. It is sending CQ 3 times followed with a DE delta echo. And for those who are not familiar with this term, and this usage means from, followed by your call sign 2 times. And repeat it again with 3 CQs, DE, and the call twice, followed by a space and the letter K, meaning over. I know, pretty simple, but as my Sepulvedaism goes, everything is simple once you know the answer. Now to the short version, where you call CQ 3 times, followed by the DE and your call twice, and followed by a K. Then pause about 7 seconds to give another station time to respond. Keep doing this until you can do it in your sleep and with no mistakes. You can do this to practice your sending, but I prefer the long version myself. Okay, now we'll cover answering a CQ. After you tune the station in so you're right on their frequency and feel comfortable with their speed, set your keyer speed to match their speed. Oh, and please never answer a station at a slower speed than they're sending. That's just disrespectful. Then, after you hear the letter K, meaning they're waiting for a call, call the station like in the example on the page. K9EID DE K5LN K5LN K. Make sure you send your call twice, because you just don't know how well they're copying, and you want to make sure they get your call right. Well, that's it. Pretty simple after doing it a zillion times, but for the folks starting out, you may want to write down their call and send it from what is written down on the paper. If you'd like, look me up in QRZ and send me an email letting me know you saw this presentation and would like to receive the documentation on having a QSO. I'll be happy to send it to you so you'll have an example of what to say in both sides of the QSO. Now we're getting into the good stuff, with the process of having a CW QSO and what to say in the initial part of the conversation, which consists of their signal report, RST, your QTH spelled out with the name you go by on the radio. First, I'm going to start the example with the other station calling CQ and you answering them. In this situation, I'll be you, K5LN, and Bob, K9EID, will be the other station calling CQ. After Bob completes his CQ and is listening for someone to answer him, I will call him by sending his call 1 time followed by the DE and my call 2 times followed by the letter K. K9EID, DE, K5LN, K5LN, K. If Bob elects to call me, he'll come back to me with my call once followed by his call. Then he'll send a brief salutation followed by the initial information consisting of my RST signal report, his QTH, and his name. Then he'll turn it back to me to send my initial information. Oh, and make sure you write down Bob's information. You'll need it for filling out your log. But even if you don't keep a log, you'll need the information to address Bob during the QSO. So how do you respond? By sending Bob's call once, followed by DE, followed by your call once, followed with a few R's, da-da-dit, to indicate you copied. However, what if the situation is that you didn't copy so well, and let's say you missed Bob's QTH but got the rest? Just send QTH question mark, followed by the ~, Bravo Kilo, meaning quick break to answer the question. Then listen closely to hear Bob repeat his QTH and turning it back to you using the Bravo Kilo Pro sign. This same process may be used for any other information that may not have been received. Just follow the key word with a question mark. Then start off with a salutation to thank Bob for calling you. Send thanks, abbreviated by Tango November X-ray, for the call, Bob. And always mention his name, so you can say it enough times to remember it. And you want to make it a personal QSO. Then follow this with the pro sign Bravo Tango, which is used for separation of phrases or sentences, instead of using a period or comma, and it's one of the most used pro signs in CW. Then give Bob his signal report by sending the letter U and R to abbreviate the word your. Then RST is 599599. If you wish, you can abbreviate the number 9 with the letter N, as in November. So it would be sent as 5NN, 5NN. Again, use the separator pro sign Bravo Tango to end the phrase. Next, send Bob your QTH by sending my QTH is round rock, comma, TX, period. And repeat it again, round rock, comma, TX, period. Then follow it with another BT separator. Now send your name twice by sending my name is Bill, followed with the BT separator. Or you can send OP is Bill, which is the ham abbreviation for operator. Either way works. In the initial part of the QSO, it's always a good idea to send the information twice, and a good habit to get into. It's the logging information you want the other station to have. Remember, some people don't use a computer for logging and still like to do it the old-fashioned way. Then send it back to Bob with a SO BTU, meaning back to you, Bob, with the pro sign AR, which means over to you. This lets him know it's coming back to him to continue into the next part of the body of the QSO. Now, send Bob's call once, followed by the DE, and your call once, followed by the letter K. Then pick up your pen, get ready to copy, because here it comes. There you go, pretty simple, and it'll become second nature the more you do it. You can use this example anytime in responding to another station calling CQ. But make sure you change the RST to give them an accurate signal report. The signal report and call sign are the only parts of the initial information that will vary. The next exchange is what I call the body of the QSO. This is where the QSO gets interesting, and a place where you find out where the other person's interests lie and what may be discussed to keep the conversation going. But first, Bob is elected to tell us about his weather, the radio he's using, its power, his antenna, and just turned it back to us for a reply. Like before, and at the start and end of every transmission, we start with their call, followed by your call, and a BT. Remember, we want to make this conversation personal. So we start out by mentioning their name and letting them know how the conditions are, with the phrase like, "Thanks, Bob, and still good copy here." And as you can see, we're using ham abbreviated words. At this time, you could also add a comment about the weather and setup, like, "Thanks, Bob, and still good copy here, and fine business on your weather conditions." As you become comfortable in your skills, you'll start to add different comments as you see fit for the conversation. But this is a good alternative to start with. Next, we now go into the weather conditions and temperature. Another note in this example is, we're using punctuations instead of pro signs. The pro sign BT Bravo Tango may still be used, it's just a different example of putting the response together. The next part is going into your station setup. Prior to sending this next phrase about your station, some people send a comment about the other person's setup, like, "Bob, you really have a super station and one that sounds like it can talk around the world." Or any other comment you come up with to give a nice report about the other person's station. Again, note all the abbreviated ham words. They're a real time saver and good to learn. One way to state your station setup is to say, rig here is, followed by the name of the radio you're using, FT3K, comma, antenna is a hex beam up 35 feet. This is a quick and short way to state what you're using, and in some cases you may also want to mention the power. In this example, you would add your radio information in the underlined areas shown in this section. This next phase is what I think is very important to continue the QSO. It's a phrase asking a question about the other person. So Bob, are you still working or retired? In the body of the QSO, you'll always want to end your transmission with a question to the other person, instead of just sending it back to them open-ended. Asking a question shows the other operator that you're interested in continuing the QSO. So don't just RST in 73s. First, that doesn't get you the practice you need to develop your skills. Second, it gives the other operator an uncomfortable feeling about continuing the QSO. After asking the question, we now send it back to Bob for his response. Note, we still use the same format with sending his call first, followed by your call and a K. So again, there it is, a total response to the other station, where you made the conversation personal and sent the information about your weather and station setup. Plus, by asking questions, shows the other operator that you're interested in learning more about them. And yes, it does get better with each QSO. Okay, in the body of each QSO is where opportunities abound to make the conversation interesting. This is where memorable QSOs come from, and what makes you wanting to have many more QSOs with this new friend you've just met. QST published an article by Mike Pulley, WB4 Zulu Kilo Alpha, called Rag Chewing 101. If you can find this article, I recommend reading it a few times to get out of the RST-73's mode of operation. Also, think up questions like, when did you start up in ham radio? Or, confirm the frequency you're on by asking, what is the frequency shown on your radio? If you haven't already received it, how is the weather at your location? What do you do for a living, or are you retired? If retired, where did you work? How long have you lived at your location? If still working, where do you work and what do you do? How long have you been a ham? Do you have any classic gear? What other hobbies do you have? These are just a few questions to get things rolling, to find the niche where you both have common interests to share with each other. Then a time will fly by and you'll notice that you are now relaxed and everything is starting to go smoothly. Now that you know how to initiate a QSO and find different things to talk about in the body of the QSO, what do you think it would take to end it? Maybe using QRT somewhere in our closing comments and thanking them for a great conversation? Wishing them well and hoping to have another QSO in the future. I'll leave this one up to you to figure out how it's done, to where you leave the QSO with an invitation for another chat. So there we have it. We've just learned how to start a QSO by using CQ and answering a CQ, what to say in the body to communicate and have an interesting and enjoyable QSO, plus an opportunity to learn how to end a QSO. So good luck and keep practicing and having many on-air QSOs, and hopefully someday you too will hear the music of CW. Don't forget, if you would like to receive my files on this subject, send me an email. 73s.